I'm proud to announce there's a speaker who won't be joining us this afternoon. Bernie Sanders. You thought he was gone after Hillary rigged the nomination in 2016, but no, he's bad like a bad sequel. And he's learned how to tweet. Check this out. We must follow New Zealand's lead, take on the NRA, and ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in the United States. We must follow New Zealand's lead. Well, here's what that looks like in cold, hard terms. I want every one of you to set a reminder for September 30th. If that day doesn't mean anything to you, I can promise you it means the world for New Zealand's gun owners, because that's the day they're forced to turn them all in. Disarm or else. Beginning October 1st, New Zealand's law-abiding people have no freedom to protect themselves, their families, and their homes with the same rifles that surround elitists like Bernie. How are they going to confiscate every rifle from their law-abiding citizens? Their neighbors in Australia wrote the playbook 20 years ago. Here's an ad the government ran in newspapers across that country. Think about it now, or you could get 12 months to think about nothing else. Can you believe that? An ad that basically is referencing prison rape. Not for the gangbangers and murderers who will never turn in their guns, but for the law-abiding, honest people who are no threat to anyone. New Zealand's Prime Minister said, quote, owning a firearm is a privilege, not a right. And Bernie says America needs to follow New Zealand's lead. Well, Bernie, serving as President of the United States is a privilege, not a right, and you're sure as hell never going to have that honor. Our next speaker is a man who's actually read the Constitution. No, not New Zealand's, America's. Last year, he went from defending your gun rights here in the Indiana House of Representatives to defending them in the United States Senate, where he's already co-sponsored the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. Please join me in welcoming a proud Hoosier and a great friend of the Second Amendment, Indiana's own United States Senator Mike Braun.
Thank you all for being here, for the patience. It's been a long stretch listening to a lot of folks. You just heard my fellow Senator Ted Cruz, how anyone could more eloquently talk about Second Amendment rights. He's the best in the business. I'm going to focus, I know you've been here a long time, about why I ran and how critical this next election is. For any of you who followed the race here in Indiana, and I'm assuming we got a few Hoosiers out there in the audience, thanks for your support. I did it for one reason. Let's look back to 2016, when we were all watching this brash New Yorker take on the establishment, take on a feat that no one said could be accomplished. I sat back, I was a state legislator, was gonna go back to where I grew up, about 2 hours south of here. I moved back home after getting a business degree for a few reasons. Wanted to raise a family, ended up being blessed with 4 kids, 3 of whom work in my business. And I wanted to start my own business. The last thing I ever thought I'd do is get into politics, let alone be a senator in an institution that I want to comment about that is broken in many ways. You see it every day. We did that. My wife has had her own business in our downtown, 41 years this September, her only job. I worked at another place for 3 years. The guy wanted me to run it someday, said, Mike, I love your education, you're a hometown boy. Stick around 15, 20 years, you might be able to run the place. I was too impatient, wanted to do my own thing. When you stick your neck out and take risk, just like the president did when he decided to run 2016, you have no guaranteed outcomes. All I can tell you, look at what the alternative would have been. Had there been a President Hillary Clinton, I would be hunkered down in southern Indiana trying to figure out how to survive, because in a moment, I'm going to tell you some of the inside scoop on what happens out there and why the institution needs to get healthier. He came in 4 times, and I'll never forget the first time in. It was 2 days after the primary, and I got to meet him for the first time. You'd think your heartbeat would flutter a little bit, and that you're meeting the President of the United States. He's one of the easiest guys to talk to that you can ever imagine. And thank goodness we had somebody that wanted to shake things up, get rid of business as usual, because that's what we've got in D.C. From tax reform, the Jobs Act. I've had a business, it'll now be 38 years. Never has the economy been any hotter. And it's due to him in setting the stage, and a few of us there, and especially the ones that were there to get that across the finish line, but it's all in peril. You know, when we talk about your upbringing and the things that motivate you to do this, I think we've lost sight of how important that is. You know, Ted mentioned earlier, we got a battle of ideas. He also mentioned that hunting, for instance, isn't the foundation of defending our Second Amendment rights. Well, whether it's hunting, whether it's recreation, whether it's self-defense, all of that is in peril. I appreciate the use of a firearm because my dad gave me a shotgun when I was 10 years old. In this day and age, liberals would consider that a violation of your upbringing. Well, that 20 gauge single shot Stevens, I still use today as I learned to use it back when I was 10 years old. Green New Deal, Medicare for all, free college tuition, getting rid of the Electoral College. Can you imagine those are topics for conversation in our country? You need to take pause. Our president made it across the finish line in a slim victory electorally, did what no one else thought could be done, winning Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and we need to be on guard. They have done everything and thrown the kitchen sink at him to make sure that's not going to happen again. All I can tell you is until we, in general, reform the institution, he's going to be struggling to get the rest of his agenda across. So every round, when there's a Senate election, we need to send more people that have done things in the real world, that have done a budget, that have done a payroll. And I get into trouble oftentimes saying it. I almost became one back in the late 70s, an attorney. But most of the folks running our government are lawyers that never really practiced, that have not done anything in the real world. And I say it to make a point. Until we get more people that step out of the comfort zone, you can expect more of the change, more of the same. So make sure, and you've heard it many times earlier today, be fully energetic, regardless of what state you're from. Make sure that we get good candidates across the finish line. I was most dismayed when I heard the statistic that had millennials only voted, only the states of West Virginia and Kentucky would have voted for our president. Those are the demographics we're up against, and that's why we got to work hard. The thing that pleased me most about my campaign, and I've met them as I've traveled the state, when I'm on recess, I get out and talk to people, want to know what's on their minds. The number of young people that are getting re-energized, despite how they go to many of our educational institutions and are being taught by folks that want to tilt them otherwise, I think they're starting to see the light. I think youth know that you can't have a free lunch to get through life. And even though you got an institution that laughs off $850 billion deficits on $22 trillion in debt, something doesn't smell right in the long run. If we don't preserve the Senate, get the president across the finish line, Ted talked about the filibuster, that'll go. If the Democrats get in power, they'll get rid of the protection that you need 60 votes before you get critical legislation across the finish line. We need to make sure we keep 50, 51 senators minimally, and that we get this president back in there to lead this nation. If we don't, there'll probably be a solution sooner than later based upon the fact that we've entered into a series of calamities. And then we'd be picking up the pieces. We as conservatives would be on the curbside for a long time. Don't underestimate how important it is. We're at, in my opinion, the most critical crossroads in our country's history. One of my favorite quotes from one of the founders, Thomas Jefferson, is that when the people try to vote themselves into prosperity through big government, handwriting is on the wall. We have never been closer to that than right now. Stand up strong, get out there, get everybody to get our president reelected, get more reinforcements like myself that can preserve what's best about this country. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate your support.